In this lesson, we're going to talk about control structures. Control structures allow you to specify whether or not certain statements are executed based on a condition.
Okay.
And the control structure we're going to be taking a look at is the if statement.
All right.
So let's start off by showing the syntax. To use the if statement, you use the if keyword followed by a condition, which is placed within parentheses.
All right. So what is a condition?
Well, a condition is simply going to be something that is evaluated to true or false.
Okay.
An if statement specifically checks to see whatever is placed within the parentheses, whether the end result of that is true or false. It could be as simple as a single variable, or it could be a full expression.
Okay.
Now, the way the if statement controls your code is such that the statement that immediately follows the if statement is what is actually going to be controlled.
Okay.
Meaning, let's say you have a statement before it, the if statement won't affect it. A statement like two statements later, that is also unaffected.
Okay.
It is only the single statement that follows your if statement.
All right. Well.
So let's say something like an echo, and we'll just echo out something simple, just so we can see that the script is working.
Right.
Now, for the condition, we're going to place the expression $A is equal to, note the double equals, and then a value, 5. This will be our expression.
So running that right now, it should just write out the word text, correct?
It'll probably show a notice saying that A is undefined. Let me go ahead and specify that $A exists and that it is equal to 5. So let's save this and verify that it's working. Well, I'll call this maybe if.php. Let's take a look. If.php. And there we go.
There you go. Look, that text. All right.
So what exactly is happening? We've set up our variable. Then we run the expression $A equals 5. If you remember from the operators lesson, we were using the single equals for assignment.
Right.
Well, we have double equals, which is a comparison operator.
Okay.
Just like any other operator, it takes in operands and performs some type of function and returns a value. In this case, we take in two operands, a left and a right operand.
Okay.
We do a check to see, we do an equality check. If they are equal, we return true. If they are unequal, we return false.
I see.
And thereby using the if statement, we can see if that's exactly what we need to check, a true or false.
I see. So what is a left and a right operand?
That was, well, we went over that somewhat in the operators lesson. What that's simply the values fed into the operation.
Okay.
So with this evaluating to true, then the following statement is run. If we were to change this, say maybe 2, and run.
Get nothing, because A no longer equals 5.
And just to clarify exactly how this is working, I'm going to put a statement before and after the if, just to show exactly what it's controlling. So we can say before if, then a line break, and after the if. So if we run, we have before and after, and because the if currently resolves to false, we get nothing in between.
Okay.
Now, let's see. Let's turn this back on for just a second, and yeah, I need that one new line there. And we can see that.
Just to make it easier to see.
Yes, we have all three. Now, how this, you see with, in this example, I have the statement on the same line, separated only by a space. What happens if we were to put this on a new line?
Okay.
Let's test that. Still works just fine. And tab it over. Once again, still just fine. And this is going back to the behavior of white space. It's not like we have to have this in any near vicinity to the if. It just has to be the following statement. We could even specify several lines later. And same thing. It's common practice to see when you're doing a single statement if, you have the statement appear on the next line and tab it over for readability.
I gotcha.
So this would be the general syntax.
So that if statement can literally be anywhere on the page. It doesn't have to be
right. You just have to be careful to not have something like this. You generally wouldn't separate it just because that becomes confusing. You can say, oh, okay, sometime later, I'm going to write some statement. I'm going to say echo weasels.
Okay.
Like so. And if we run that, it appears before the text.
Okay, I see.
And now if we set it to false, or set it to a value that is unequal, text is continued to run.
I see.
So you have to be very careful in that. The following statement. That's why you generally don't put any type of spacing in between.
I gotcha. Okay.
So that covers how you would go about executing a single statement.
Mm-hmm.
How would you go about grouping statements? Let's say you want to have an if condition, but you want to have more than one statement run, depending on that condition.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
This introduces statement grouping. To group statements, you use the curly braces. So an open curly brace and a closed curly brace.
Okay.
And this basically gives you a statement block, where you have all of these can be controlled from one point. So if we run it as now, of course, it's not going to change.
Of course.
But we can add multiple statements now. So you could say text and, I don't know, second text. If we run that,
nothing.
it seems to run, and if we re-enable it, both of them are now grouped.
I see.
So
do they have to be within those curly braces to work like that?
Yes, anything put outside the curly braces is, if it's put after, then it's on its own. It's not has absolutely no relation to the if statement.
Oh, I see. So it would just print that out anyway.
Now, here's something interesting. What if you were to insert a statement in between the braces and the group? Let's do echo, insert, and then do a new line. So what do you think would happen in this case?
Well, it should have the word insert before the text, correct?
Right, but and one thing we'll see, though, is how this affects the grouping.
Oh, okay.
So we do have the condition set so it'll evaluate to true. So yeah, so you're right, it should evaluate the insert. Let's see what happens to this group, though. Well, all of it's showing. Now let's see what happens when we take it to inequal.
Oh, I see.
The group is now on its own. This is an interesting behavior to note. This, by itself, is completely valid. You can make a statement group sitting out by itself, and there are no problems with doing that.
I see.
If it doesn't follow an if statement, there's not a lot of reason to do it, or if it's not following some kind of control structure.
I see.
And what happened here when we inserted this extra statement is now this is the statement following the if. This entire group is a statement that is on its own, now independent from this if.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. All right. That makes sense.
So that pretty much covers the usage of statements with an if and group statements with an if. Now let's take a closer look at exactly what's going on here with this comparison operator. In the past we'd shown operators that perform things like mathematical functions. In this case, we're performing, like we discussed earlier, a comparison operation, something that takes in operands, does an equality check, and returns true or false. Now, this is still an operator in the classic sense of the term. Let's create another variable. We'll call this one $b and set it to 5. And now, let's use this operator outside of the context of an if statement.
Okay.
Let's say we're going to have $c, and we'll use it to store the result of this operator. So we'll say that $c equals $a equals 5. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take b out because that confuses things. I'll stick with the a equals 5 just like we have been.
Okay.
So we have $c equals the result of this operation. The comparison has a higher precedence than the assignment. Therefore, this part of the expression will be evaluated first. The result will be stored in C.
Okay.
So if we take $c, put it within the if statement. I'm going to erase all the other lines just so that cleans up our code a little bit.
Okay. All right.
So here we have the same thing. We have our comparison taking place with the result being stored and then later checked by the if. So if we were to run this, nothing executes. That's because 2 is not equal 5. And if we set it, then it works just fine. So we see this does in fact work in the classic sense of an operator. It can be run on its own. Storing it like this is kind of redundant because if checks for true or false anyway, and you generally want to just put the expression there. There's generally no need to store it.
Okay.
But just showing that
it can be done.
Yeah, that all this is an operation.
Okay.
Or it's an expression that returns a result.
Okay. All right.
Another interesting thing to keep in mind is, or actually a pitfall to be aware of, is to avoid using the single equal.
Okay.
Because it's interesting because it can make it look like your code is working, but you get odd results. What happens if we were to do this, a equals 5, and just run it? It seems like it's still working.
Right.
Now, what happens if we change it to 2? I'm going to erase this expression. This is just to demonstrate that we were working as we should. So let's say we have a is equal to 2, and now we're checking a equals 5, but using the assignment instead of the comparison operator. That's odd. A is equal to 2.
But
then we say, if a equals
text.
5. What's happening here is we are, in fact, assigning 5 into A. But something to keep in mind is, even with an assignment, there is still a return value. Even though we generally only use it to store and then ignore the return value.
Right.
In this case, it's in an if statement. We are checking the return. And the return is something other than 0. Actually, what it returns is whatever was assigned.
Oh,
if you assign 5 into something, then it will return 5. If you were to assign the text cat into something, it would return cat.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And because, like we had discussed in the past, we have automatic conversions that take place, it's saying, all right, let's convert 5 to a Boolean. Well, 5 is something other than 0, and therefore we're going to evaluate it as true, which means that this is always going to be true. A is always going to be set to 5, and this is always going to be return 5, converts to true, and we execute. So at this point, this is no longer variable. We can set A to anything, and it's always going to execute.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
It's just something to be aware of, because if you forget and use use the assignment instead of the comparison, the code will execute just fine. You'll just get unexpected results.
Okay.
So let's take a look at what other comparison operators we have available to us.
Okay.
So far, we've only used the is equal to operator. We also have an is not equal to.
Okay.
So under this case, A is set to 2. We're checking to see if A is not equal to 5, which in this case it should be, so we should see our printed result.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So because it's not 5, that you're going to see the printed results anyway.
Right. So in this case, if it was 2,
you would get nothing.
Exactly. So it's just like before. We were saying that the double equals was a comparison that checked for equality.
Right.
This checks for inequality.
I see.
Returns true on inequality.
I see.
So the next one we want to take a look at is greater than. If A is greater than 2, then we'll
see the text.
So if it's equal, we get nothing. If it's less than, obviously, we get nothing. And if it is greater than, then the statement is true, and we continue. So we also have less than, represented by the less than sign.
So more than likely, exact same thing, just opposite.
Exactly. Now we have greater than or equal to. So like before, we did when we said A equals 2, this was false if we just said A is greater than 2. We have greater than or equal to, which means that
you will see it because it also has the equal to in there.
Exactly. So it's basically if it's greater than or equal to, then you're good to go. And of course, we also have less than or equal to. Now, two final comparison operators I want to take a look at are is identical to.
Okay.
This is represented by a triple equal sign.
Triple equal sign.
This, what this gets at is we have automatic conversions in place, which means, what if we were to say, okay, let me define two variables to illustrate this. Let's say we have $B, and it equals the string 2.
Okay.
And if we were to use the double equal comparison operator and run this, let's see what happens. It evaluates to true.
Okay.
This is because, all right, we have the integer 2 and the string 2.
Right.
We compare them using the standard comparison operator. This means that any necessary conversions will take place, meaning that if it wanted to, 2 could be converted to a string, or the string 2 could be converted to a number. After the conversion, they are the same thing. They are the number 2, which is, of course, evaluating to true. Now, if you want your code to be able to detect the difference, like let's say you have two types, even though they would convert to the same thing, you still want to be able to tell that whether or not they are identical.
Okay.
And that's done with the triple equals. If we were to run this, it is now false.
Because
the number 2 is not identical to the string 2.
I see. So A is not actually identical to B at all.
Right. It is not exactly the same thing.
I got you. Okay.
And we also have the is not equal to. So exclamation mark in front of the double equals.
I see.
So not identical to. And with that covers the comparison operators that I wanted to show. Now let's take a look at logical operators.
All right.
Well, let's see. Let me set up a test case here. We'll have if A is equal to 5. And let's introduce the logical operator AND.
Okay.
It is represented by 2 ampersand signs.
Okay.
The key or the symbol
Makes
above
sense
the 7.
because it's supposed to be and. So.
And what this allows us to do is, I guess you could say it allows us to make compound decisions.
Okay.
So we have one simple expression. We can use the and to check that with another expression. So I'll say $B, whether or not $B is equal to 2.
Oh, I see. So in other words, if A and B, or if A equals 5 and B equals 2, then you'll get those texts.
Exactly.
I see.
So let's take a look at this.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, our syntax is correct there. So here's exactly what's happening. We have some operators, and it's a comparison, but the logical operators are operators like all the others and obey the same rules.
Okay.
First, we have the order of precedence, and in this case, the comparison operator takes precedence over the logical and.
Okay.
This means that if we were to start evaluating it, or when PHP evaluates this, we look at this first. So we check this and get a result from it.
Right.
So we get, in this case, true, because A is equal to 5.
Right.
Next highest would be this one, because it's same as this, so we evaluate left to right.
Right.
We check this, it is true. Next we check this expression. Is B equal to 2? Yes, it is. We get true. Now finally we compare, say, if true and true, continue.
I see. Okay.
Now let's change B to something else. Let's change it to if B equals 6. And now it's not.
Nothing.
So even though this part of it was true, this part of it was false. So if we get false and true, the entire thing is false.
I see.
So then we have false, and we skip this.
I gotcha.
So that's the logical and. Let's take a look at logical or.
Okay.
Or is represented by the double pipe symbol.
Okay.
And what this allows is either side, or if either operand is true, then the entire statement will be true. So if we were to evaluate this, let's save and run. Now it does work.
I see.
Even though this was false, the entire thing still ran.
Because it was saying either, A equals 5 or B equals 6. It doesn't matter which one, then it'll show the text.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that covers the logical operator.
And those are pretty much exactly what the names say, because they're just logical. If you sit down and think about it, it'd just be super easy to run.
Right. Generally, you can do that. You can simply look at it and say, as long as you can break things down into smaller expressions based on their order of precedence, then it becomes very apparent. You can see that this is looked at on its own because it's has a higher precedence.
Right.
So we can say, if this or this, then do something.
That's right. So it's just common sense stuff.
Now, let's take a look at one final thing, the not operator.
Okay.
And I'm going to set up a different example for all of this. I'm going to say we have a variable $active, and it is a Boolean value set to false. Now, let's say we want some code that is able to check whether or not we are active.
Okay.
So, in the past, using just what we know, we could say something like $active. So if $active is equal to false, then do something like echo we are not active.
Okay.
So that of course works.
All right.
Now that was using the old, just the simple comparison operator. If we wanted to use, let's say we wanted to invert the value of this as to whether or not it resolves to true, we can use the not operator, which is the exclamation point.
Right.
I'm also going to space these off of the parentheses just to make it a little bit more apparent.
Okay.
So we were testing for active. If not active, print that we're not active.
Okay.
Now, if we were to run it and leave it alone, we see that, once again, works just fine.
Right.
So in some cases, this simply acts as shorthand where you don't have to type out the rest of it saying is equal to some other value.
Okay.
The other thing this can be used for is to invert the result of some other expression. And I will go ahead and show that. So let's bring back our A and B example. So we have $A is equal to 5 and $B is equal to 2. Now let's replace $active with an expression. Except this time I'm going to put the expression in parentheses. So if $A is equal to $B, then run. So we can see, let's see, if A is equal to B, we see that it does in fact run.
Right.
Now nothing's getting a little bit deep here because we have to look at various ways that this executes. But
right.
So we have A is equal to B, 5 does not equal 2. So this, everything in these parentheses are false.
Oh, I see. Okay, so because A is not equal to 5, because you're putting the not in front of it.
Right, so we have this set to false, and then we invert that so that it's set to true. Now the if statement is looking at the entire thing as true, and then we continue.
I gotcha, okay.
This is also very useful if, let's say you had some type of logical setup where you had one side and the second side, but you wanted the inverse of the second side. Basically, you wanted to invert one to true or false.
Okay, I gotcha.
Basically, that's all it does, is it takes one operand, and it simply inverts it. True becomes false, false becomes true.
Okay.
And with that, that pretty much wraps up various conditional operators.
Okay.
Now, the last thing we're going to take a look at in this lesson is continuing with the if example a little bit, showing how we make this a little bit more powerful.
Okay.
Let's simplify this down to back to if a is equal to 5. And we'll say, let's make this easier to show what it's doing. So echo $A is 5. And of course run it in very simple, A is 5. Now let's say we want something to happen if it's not 5. You've seen in the past if we were to set this to so that it was unequal, nothing would happen.
Right.
If we want to set up a case that would actually catch that and cause something to happen, we could use the keyword else.
I see.
And I'm going to block in. You notice even in this case where I have a single statement, I am using the statement grouping, the block.
Yeah.
That's just good practice because it makes things easier to see.
I gotcha. Okay.
If you're new to this, I would probably just use that as a habit.
Because because immediately when you see those brackets, you're going to know that.
Because it just says, all right, we have if condition and then everything within here. This is what executes belonging to this if condition. And then the same thing for the else.
Just makes it cleaner and easier to use.
So we can say echo $A was an unknown value. Simply because it wasn't 5.
Okay.
So if we run this now, and what did we have last time? We had A was 5, so let's set it to something else. Let's make A equal to 2. And parser. Line 12.
What happened?
On line 12, I didn't terminate this statement. Simple mistakes. They happen.
Yeah.
$A was an unknown value. So we're doing a test for whether or not A is equal to 5. If so, reporting. Otherwise, it was something that we didn't check.
Okay, so the else pretty much would be like, so if it's equal to 5, it'll say A is 5. But if it's not, this is what's going to happen instead.
Yeah, it's useful when you want to do a check, but have an all other cases scenario.
Okay.
So that way if you had something...
So if it was the result you were expecting, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
But if it's not, this is what you need to have happen.
Right, we're saying overall, we want this decision to output something.
Okay.
In all cases, we want to have output.
Okay.
And the else gives us that ability. In all other cases, there will still be output.
I see. So in other words, you won't just get a blank screen and be like, what's going on? Yeah,
right.
So it'll tell you what's going on.
Now, the last thing we'll look at is the else if.
Okay.
So, like it sounds, we're simply combining the both of them, else and if. So, let's say else if $A is equal to, let's make this more interesting. Let's say else if $A is greater than 3. And then brace this in. So, what this should do, let's see, let's echo out $A is greater than 3. And then do the new line. So I guess with the single statement, I don't actually need the new line.
Okay.
But all the same. Now looking at this, the way else if works is, once again, we can do a check. If this returned false,
right,
we of course skip this. The next thing we check is otherwise. So basically like an else. We see that this was false.
Oh,
so
I see what's going on. Yeah.
So catch the everything else, except we do run another condition. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to...
Yeah, so in other words, it's like if A equals 5, you're going to get A is 5. But if it's not, we're
going to continue and do another check.
You'll continue into another check. So then it'll say, or if it's A is, greater than 3, then you'll...
It's a way of giving multiple check scenarios.
I see.
So you can say, is it equal to something? If not, was it equal to something else? Then in all other cases scenario.
I gotcha. Okay.
And let's see. Though this does bring up an interesting point as the way stuff executes. Let's take a look and see what happens, because if you look at it, A, in our case, let's see. Actually, all of these should still hit the unknown value.
Right.
So we run,
Yeah,
it's
just
unknown.
say unknown because...
So was 2 equal to 5? No.
No.
Is 2 greater than 3? No. Alright, well, else, just show it was unknown.
Right.
Let's say that A was equal to 4.
And then...
A is greater than 3. So we run through, is A 5? No. Is it greater than 3?
Yes.
Yes. And you can see that in this type of control statement, only one of these are going to be executed.
I gotcha. And it immediately stops right after that execution.
Because we hit this, we completely skip the else.
Right.
Now...
So it does pretty much like a series of checks. Well, it didn't equal 5, so let's go to the next one. So, it was greater than 3, so we'll stop right here. We don't have to go any further.
Right. Once any one of these are true, then that's it for the entire control structure.
I see.
Now let's take a look at something interesting. What if A was equal to, let's say, 5, and run it? Now we meet both of these cases. A is 5 and A is greater than 3. In this case, whichever one happens first is going to be the only one. Just like how, in this case, we skip the final else, the same thing will happen to an else if.
I see. So it stopped right after the first execution of whatever you wanted to do.
So if,
I gotcha.
Right off the bat, if this was true, we don't even bother checking anything else. This part was true, so we don't need to consider these cases. It's basically if false, then we look into checking the auxiliary cases.
I see. Okay.
So with that pretty much wraps up control structures.
All right.
We covered things like exactly what control structures were. We took a look at using a basic if and exactly how statements are set up such that they are controlled, meaning the following statement is what is controlled by an if statement. Then we took a look at comparison operators and exactly how they work, that a comparison operator takes in operands and returns true or false.
I gotcha.
And then we looked at logical operators, and finally we took a look at using else and else if.
Okay.
So with that, that's going to wrap up this lesson.
All right, cool.